How much of what you feel in a game was something you were meant to feel? The methods Monster Hunter Wilds uses to influence mood and emotion are interesting to try and explain because so much of what it does invisibly. Nothing that happens is outright asking for your attention, and really you don't even have to be there to witness any of it happen. None of these things happen by accident either, so why are some of them intentionally invisible? There's a handful of ways I think it does this. The scale, the sound, the color, the way that the environment can tell you what happened before you were there without outright telling you. The visible stuff and the invisible stuff all working together to tell one complete story. Let's start with the most obvious way it does this, with scale. There's always something on the horizon whether you're looking out of the playable area or deeper into it, and the further you look, the more there is. From herbivores moving in packs, watching each other's backs on the way to their watering holes and living out their daily routines, to larger monsters that have their own routines, their own territories, and they rest, eat, and move throughout the world like they own it, because they kinda do. All of that together makes the world feel vast in a way that's hard to fake. The scale of it doesn't feel designed, it just feels real. Every animal has a routine, every sightline has a reason for being there, every waterfall is coming from somewhere and going to somewhere. That stuff doesn't just end up in a game by accident. Someone had to look at a forest and decide it needed a pack of herbivores with actual social behavior. Someone had to decide that those waterfalls would dwarf the players and the monsters they would hunt there. And someone had to make all the other decisions that made this world come together in a way that felt less like a diorama of a forest and more like the real thing. And this intentional design doesn't just stop at scale, it can be other things like sound. Even with nothing happening here, you can hear what the air feels like. Take a listen. Sound can tell you things that your eyes can't. You don't have to see something to know it's there, like hearing people talking behind you despite looking away from them, or hearing running water and knowing that the ripples in the pond are coming from that water source. Let's take a moment and listen to this next shot and see what you might be able to pick out happening off screen. Sound is another one of those invisible design choices that's constantly giving you new information to process, giving you a bigger picture of the world around you than just what can fit on your screen. Every sound you heard in those shots was a conscious decision. The ambience, the wildlife, the distant water, all of it was placed there deliberately to make sure the world around you never felt hollow. That stuff takes a lot of work to get right, and it's easy to make a world that feels full but sounds empty. But Monster Hunter Wilds never lets that happen. Sound isn't the only thing doing that either. Color is working the same way, constantly feeding you new information and shaping how you feel about a place before you've had a chance to think about it. You're absorbing information about color constantly, and most of the time you don't even register that it's telling you anything. Every area in this game has a palette, and that palette is always communicating something to you. There's something immediately comfortable about this shot. It's amber and golden, and it just feels kinda safe. This one feels completely different. It's all blue and cold and quiet, and it feels a little bit more like a place for mourning. This is actually the game's Halloween event, and the color is doing a lot of heavy lifting to set that somber, spooky tone you might feel when looking at these shots in contrast to the warmer, safer shot from before. You can feel the mood before it's directly communicated to you, and that's what good color does. What you just saw is a good example of how much color can be used as a tool to deliberately influence a player's mood in an environment. Different colors can carry different meanings, and we sometimes associate colors with things instinctively. Red can feel hot, urgent, and dangerous. Green can feel alive, natural, and safe, and blue can feel cold, distant, and lonely. Monster Hunter Wilds leans into all of this. The colors in every area aren't accidental. They're chosen to make you feel something specific about where you are. Now we've talked about scale, sound, and color, three tools that are constantly influencing how you experience the world of Monster Hunter and shaping how you experience these places without ever blatantly drawing attention to themselves. We can now use those tools to analyze other areas in the game, and the best way to see all of that in action is to just take a look. You can hear chains moving here, so we know people live here and that they have some sort of machinery running without actively seeing it happen. Analyze the techniques used in this next scene and think about how much outside of the obvious lava flows and molten rock influences why this place feels hot. Yeah, it is very hot here, and the bubbling of the lava, the sizzling surfaces, and the red and orange tones here definitely reinforce that. Now this furnace is huge, so we know from its scale that it serves some sort of importance even if we can't pick out that importance right away. The scale, sound, and color of these scenes is communicating to you more than just what your eyes can tell you that you're in a fiery cavern. They tell you how hot this cavern is, whether there are people actively living here, and what parts of those people's village they might find the most important to themselves. You're not supposed to walk through that cavern and think about the color theory or the sound design of the area that you're in. You're supposed to feel immersed in the world you're exploring, like the deserts and forests and caverns are real spaces that you're just one small part of, and that you're experiencing those spaces through your own perspective. The point of that is that you, as the player, aren't constantly thinking about where the video game ends and where the immersed world begins. That kind of immersion is the result of intentionally invisible design, work that through the effort of the developers you're never meant to consciously think about in a way that pulls your immersion out of the world and into a more analytical or critical thought process. The goal is to let the player experience the world, and not to think about how it was built. There's another thing that Wilds does that isn't exactly invisible, but that I think is worth mentioning because it does this so well. Environmental storytelling. The way that a space can communicate history and narrative visually through the world around the player rather than through direct exposition. When the environment is giving you a narrative, you aren't being told what to believe, you're discovering it. In some parts of the real world, this might look like finding seashells in your backyard hundreds of miles inland because there used to be an ocean where your house was. But in Wilds, this can look like seeing the ruins of a civilization and knowing not just that they were there, but how large that civilization was and what kind of architecture that civilization used. That kind of storytelling is effective because it's another way that the player can remain immersed in the world. The game can tell you about how an ancient civilization existed in the area the game takes place in, but without being able to visually see the remnants or some proof that they were there, it would feel disconnected. Thankfully, Wilds provides us with plenty of that proof. All four of these next scenes are from an area called the Ruins of Wyveria. From these few shots, we know that the civilization that these ruins come from was one of vast scale, and that whatever happened to this civilization gave rise not just to the life that inhabits it now, but to biological-looking structures that fill some of the larger open spaces deep inside these ruins. We don't need the game's exposition to know these things, but when the game does touch on these points, they're reinforced by things that we've already seen and can immediately believe these stories not just because it's what we're being told, but because it's something we've experienced firsthand. This type of environmental storytelling creates a sense that the world has a history that predates not just you, but the narrative that's happening at the present time as well, and reinforces the idea that the regions in Monster Hunter have a long and storied history outside of just the events of the game. It creates a feeling for the player that the areas that the game takes place in aren't just purpose-made backdrops for your hunts, but a living, breathing world that you just happen to be hunting in. Because this world feels like it has a history from before you got there, it's easier to believe in the world, and it's easier to become and remain immersed. Monster Hunter Wilds does a lot of intentional things, some visible and some invisible, to make the player believe certain things that make it easier for them to become a part of the world of Monster Hunter. Some of these things you might notice, and some of them you might not, but it's all working toward one common goal: immersion. One of the biggest strengths of Wilds is how well it uses all these tools, and to me, that's what makes Wilds stand out not just from other games in the Monster Hunter series, but from other games across the industry as a whole. Sure, Wilds isn't the only game that exists that makes use of these tools, and sure, it's not the single most immersive game to ever exist, but it's one that sits close to my heart, and it's one that I feel has some of the best examples of the things that we talked about today. Next time you're playing something that you feel truly immerses you, try taking a few moments to think about why it feels that way. You might be surprised to find how interested you are in some of the ways that was accomplished. The Monster Hunter series are some of my favorite games, and Monster Hunter Wilds is one of my favorites in the series. If you get the chance to play it, I think it's well worth it. Whether you spend your time analyzing what makes the world what it is, or just having fun and enjoying your time with the game, I would strongly encourage anyone watching this that found any single part of this interesting to give it a shot. The series has never been more accessible to new players than it is now, and there's so much more to the game than the little that I've shown here. There's a whole world out there to see, and it's worth getting lost in. Until next time, take care.